Welcome into the Big Little Podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Patrick Previty. That is Andrew Greig. We are in the middle of April, and the biggest time in the NBA is right now with the NBA awards coming up and the NBA playoffs and play-in games. So we're going to be talking about that, as well as potentially the most impactful college football story of all time. Nico Iamaleava is now in the transfer portal, maybe on his own accord, but definitely from Tennessee also agreeing with him and pushing him out. This all came after a potential holdout and a ton of conflicting reports. So we're going to get into that as well. But like I mentioned at the very top, we're going to start with the NBA awards. Let's go to the MVP. I think I know who you have now based off of what you changed the last time that we talked, but we're going to start there.
Yeah, so my 2024-25 MVP this season is going to be Nikola Jokic. At least personally, I think that he deserves the MVP. I don't know that the awards, who the people that vote on the awards are exactly going to give it to him. I think that there's a lot of voter fatigue that goes into it. But the fact that of his 3 MVP seasons prior to this season, this is the best season that he's had as an individual. Obviously, maybe not as a team. Like the team success hasn't always been there for the Denver Nuggets. They're tied for the 3rd best record in the West, which is a little bit subpar for them, especially coming into the Western Conference playoffs as the 4th seed. But individually, if you look at all the stats, he's up in every single category. I think he deserves the MVP for like a variety of different reasons. Obviously, the coach gets fired at the end of it, and they still managed to float into that playoff race amongst the better teams in it. So I just think he's the MVP for like a couple different reasons.
You know, it's interesting because I agree, and we talked about this in a couple videos ago, and I was surprised that we agreed. But Shea is right now at minus 5,000, I think, and it's so ridiculous. I don't know if these books know who is voting on this award, like if they know their voter history, because it just seems like everything that I see on social media and all of that kind of leans towards Jokic.
Yeah,
I mean, it seems like it leans toward Jokic, but still at the end of the day, it's Shea who's the betting favorite. I understand it. Like, obviously, he's having an amazing season. No disrespect to either of these players, but that's all I seem to see.
Yeah, I think the odds makers know that like Shea's gonna win the award, like because he's had it wrapped up for a little minute now. A lot of the fact that Jokic is gaining all these stats and all these things are coming well after Shea's kind of like made his case and the Thunder are 16 games ahead of the Rockets for the best seed in the Western Conference. So they won almost 70 games this season. And Shea has like an amazing case, and I think that's what the odds makers are basically telling you, despite the fact that Nikola Jokic is having to carry his team and make the best of like a pretty bad situation at this point. Like the odds makers just believe that SJ's basically had this award wrapped up since late, like early March, late February.
All right, well, let's move to Defensive Player of the Year. Who do you have winning that award?
Yeah, so I have Draymond Green winning this award, which is kind of funny because obviously this award should have gone to Wemby, and it probably will go to Wemby for the next decade plus. But obviously Wemby's out for the season, hasn't played since February. Despite that, I just want to make one point on Wemby: the fact that he still leads the league in blocks throughout, like was the league leader in blocks despite like missing the last 3 months of the season is absolutely insane. The case for Draymond Green is that he's an undersized forward that can guard 1 through 5 extremely well. Nobody hustles like Draymond Green, obviously. Like we know this from any Warriors team that you watched ever. I think that his history with the award definitely leans to him getting it over other players like Dyson Daniels that we mentioned, just other players that are possibly in contention. The fact that maybe his statistical numbers aren't always there, but averaging over a block and a steal per game is pretty decent, especially when you're doing it against the bigger players in the league, especially when the Warriors decide to go small ball. So I think that Draymond Green has made a decent case for himself all season long. And the fact that Wemby's not in this race, it has a big factor into why he'll probably get his last Defensive Player of the Year in his career.
Yeah, this is definitely the last possible Defensive Player of the Year, unless something unfortunately happens to Wemby again. I don't know if Draymond Green has shown all season since the very beginning of the year that he is this Defensive Player of the Year. And I think Evan Mobley has. Now, I'll say this one thing about Draymond Green, just also in his support. I think some people maybe just weren't paying attention. He had that game against Giannis, right? Whenever Giannis was matched up against him, and he went 0 for 7. And Draymond Green was like, I'm sending in this tape. I'm the Defensive Player of the Year. And he kind of started the media campaign and kind of flipped this whole thing on its side, especially since Wemby was out. But I think Evan Mobley being the best defender on the best team in the Eastern Conference, and just him also being able to guard multiple positions and not having to rely on Jared Allen being out there as well. I think is really impressive, and I think he is the defensive player of the year. But definitely glad that you also mentioned Dyson Daniels, because he led the league in steals, and he should be mentioned because he's left off of my ballot for the future here when we talk about it. So I just had to give my own little shout out to him. But let's move to rookie of the year. I think we're both in agreement here.
Yeah, I think on both fronts of this point that I'm going to make, Jared McCain, like, obviously came into the season with a crazy hot start to the season, and was from there, it looked like the rookie of the year, despite whatever anyone says about him. But I going from the second half of the season, Stephon Castle has just completely taken off. Obviously, that coincides with the Wemby injury, so some of the numbers are inflated. They needed another score after Fox went down as well. But since the All-Star break, he's averaged almost 18 points a game, almost 5 assists per game, and a steal a game. Like, since the All-Star break, he's been like one of the Spurs best players as a rookie, and just one of the best players like to come on since the All-Star break. Like, the drastic jump in numbers from the All-Star break pre to post was actually insane. And if his 3-point shot starts coming around, he shoots sub 30% from the 3-point range. But if his 3-point shot starts to come around, he could be one of the best guards in the league, I think. So I'm pairing, and just for years to come, I think Stephon Castle has kind of wrapped up this award. There's no one else that really stands out. There's obviously some higher overall picks that like had good seasons but not great seasons. I think this pick has is kind of wrapped up, but to put like a bow on it, this Spurs team could be really dangerous for like years to come. Obviously, they have Wemby. CP3 played all 82 games this season. They have the guys like Fox. They have Vassell. They have Keldon Johnson. They have Harrison, Barnes. This Spurs team could be really good if they can bring a lot of these players back. And if with Wemby at the helm, look out for the Spurs next season is all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I think they would have been at least a play-in team in the Western Conference this year, like having everybody like stay healthy. Like, I just felt like they were really good. But yeah, next year I think they'll take another jump. I agree. Yes, Stephon Castle. Nobody's really doing it efficiency-wise either in this group, like that, like with the same amount of volume. And he's obviously benefiting, ironically, from some of the injuries because he's getting more run out there. But yeah, I think he's the rookie of the year. Okay, most improved, we definitely disagree, I think.
Yeah,
I got Zubats.
Mine is Dyson Daniels, so we kind of reflected on him like during the Defensive Player of the Year pick, but that's partially why I have him as my most improved pick. He's doing it on both ends of the floor. Obviously, the Hawks have had a ton of injuries this season. That's kind of led to him getting more run, just like kind of like the Stephon Castle pick. But he's made the most of it. He's started and played in 76 games this season, which is career highs for him. Obviously, he was coming off the bench for the Pelicans the last couple of years and was an average bench player for them. But he averaged almost 15 points per game, which is like an 8-point jump in points per game for him. So on offense, he's way more efficient. He's not only taking 7 more shots a game, he's actually had his highest ever field goal percentage and 3-point percentage this season. And obviously these numbers are going to increase. He's getting more minutes per game, but that's what most improved is about, like being able to make the most of the minutes that you're getting. And he's definitely done that this season. He's seen a lot of jumps in his minutes, but they coincided with him having his best statistical categories in all 5 of the major statistical categories: points, rebounds, blocks, assists, steals. All of those he's up in, which, I mean, makes sense. But I just think that Dyson Daniels has been one of the better players on that Hawks team that has obviously struggled throughout the season. But I can't not give it to him for all the jumps that he's made this season.
I can't really disagree with you because I don't even know where the Hawks would be right now. Like, legitimately, I think they would either be further down in the play-in or just completely out of it. Like, and because the play-in doesn't really have too much separating any of the teams right now, especially in the Eastern Conference. So I who knows where they would be without him. And just seeing that jump is really impressive. And that is what the most improved award is about. That's why Cade Cunningham, for me, and I'm guessing also for you, like if you were to make a full ballot for the most improved, isn't on there. Like, for me, it would be Dyson Daniels is at number 2, and then maybe I would just throw in Cade Cunningham or something like that. But this award is about players that maybe are going from like decent role player to really impactful starter, or like role player, just random role player, to good starter or something along those lines. Dyson Daniels definitely fits it. I just think Zubats just was way more impactful not way more, but just more impactful for the Clippers. Just from the start of the year to the finish of the year, he was there no matter what, averaging 17.5 points, 12.5 rebounds, being really good defensively, probably really underrated defensively, played in 80 games this season. And this was essentially a batch of characters plus Ty Lue for the Clippers. And when Kawhi Leonard came back, this team ended up taking that like next step. It was James Harden, Norman Powell, and they were extremely good this year as well. But Zubats was probably, in my opinion, the most consistent player on that team from start to finish. So that's why I had to give it to him. But got to shout out Dyson Daniels. I mean, he was great this year.
Yeah, and I mean, I mentioned all of his offensive statistical improvements, but he was obviously in the running for Defensive Player of the Year. We mentioned during that conversation, he averaged 3 steals a game, which is unheard of in today's NBA or just any NBA. It's the 9th highest mark in NBA history. So for all the contributions he's made on offense and defense, all the jumps that he's made, I think I had to give it to him. But I completely see your point with Zubac.
I almost feel like I'm making a mistake because he is in the running for that Defensive Player of the Year award, and I don't have him on either of them. Like, I almost feel like there's no way that he could potentially not win either, right? To kind of come home empty-handed. I think that might be what's bugging me about my ballot. But let's move to Coach of the Year. Who do you got?
Yeah, so for all the stuff that the Rockets have gotten all season long and just not enough credit from the media, I wanted to give their head coach a shout out, Ime Udoka. You might not get any national media coverage, but you win the Big Little podcast award for at least Andrew Greig's side of the ballot for Coach of the Year. So you have something to your name. Obviously, all the players that need to make jumps this season, like Amen Thompson, and just a bunch of players on that team that need to play better this season. They were a 500 team last year in his first season coaching, just barely missed the playoffs. And the fact that they were able to win 11 more games this season, weren't even really in that battle for that 3 through 8th seed. They were able to win enough games throughout the regular season to not force themselves into having to play their starters late into the season, which I think is a credit to not only like him, but the players in general. And the fact that they have been taking all those steps forward this season is like almost a direct credit to him. I think that the culture kind of just completely changed when he got in the door. The Rockets kind of like, it felt like their culture died after James Harden left and needed a resurgence. Ime Udoka was that resurgence. They went from 500 team to well in the playoffs this year. And if I told you last year that the Rockets were going to be the second best team in the West, which arguably they're not the second best team in the West, but they do have the second best record. If I told you that was a possibility last year, you probably would have laughed, probably would have said that they were like a play-in team or at best, like the 6th or the 5th seed. They're the 2nd seed. And I think that obviously there's a bunch of really great coaches that made a lot of really great improvements. You look at the Cavs and you look at everything that like a bunch of different teams are doing this season. But I think that the Rockets jump this season has been one of the more impressive ones. And I want to give Ime Udoka and the Rockets some credit this season.
I almost feel like this is the most competitive award, just like consistently every year, because you're right. There are so many really good picks. The Detroit Pistons literally tripled, I believe, their win total with JB Bickerstaff. That is extremely impressive. And that's not even my Coach of the Year. And unfortunately, Ime Udoka, you're going to have to share the Big Little Coach of the Year award with, in my opinion, Kenny Atkinson. I think you bring in a coach for the Cleveland Cavaliers as like the main thing that you change about this team. And you end up winning 60 games, go on a 17-game winning streak or whatever it was, and just completely flip the franchise trajectory from a middling Eastern Conference team to now potentially a finals and championship contending basketball team. That is a jump I just can't ignore. But shout out Ty Lue as well. Shout out JB Bickerstaff for that complete turnaround for the Detroit Pistons. They, them coming up empty here too, with no Cade Cunningham as most improved and no Coach of the Year, kind of also feels a little bit wrong. But I think it's just too undeniable how good the Cavs have been for me to just not give it to Kenny Atkinson. But also, I did want to say, with Udoka going to the Rockets, they got an adult in the room. And that was like a part of it. And they ended last year so strong that obviously ended up helping them into this year. Kind of reminded me a lot of like that Suns team that had that that bubble run, right? When they went undefeated in the bubble, still didn't make the playoffs. And then the next year they were, really good. So I think it reminded me a lot of that too.
Yeah, and just one final thing about Ime Udoka's season. I think it's also impressive that there wasn't a lot of movement this NBA offseason. I feel like it was one of the more dull ones, especially relative to what has been the NBA offseason for the last couple of years. But they didn't really make any huge roster changes. Like, this is all kind of like the staff that they were working with last year, a team that was like 500 last year and was fighting just to get their way through the playoffs. So I think that is especially impressive. And that kind of is the story with a lot of these different teams, but especially the ones that have made progressive jumps. But just the fact that they were able to stay in house and keep the players that they kind of wanted to build around, like Amen Thompson and Albert Sengun and Jalen Greed, Fred VanVleet being one of those adults in the room this season. I definitely think that's a testament to the coaching staff and everything that they've done this season. So just not making any really big changes, sticking from that hot start or hot end to the season and carrying that into the beginning of the next season is something to be said. And I just really like the way that Ime Udoka kind of prep that team to be ready this season. So,
all right, last one up, sixth man of the year.
Sixth man of the year, Peyton Pritchard. I don't think that there's any denying this one. There's definitely like arguments to be made, but Peyton Pritchard has definitely taken a step up in a team that like maybe didn't need it, but it becomes all that much more scary when they have a guy like Peyton Pritchard averaging over 14 points and coming off the bench consistently. Obviously, this is the first season that he's ever averaged double digits. So just another threat that the Celtics have. And just an overall really great season. He's progressed from kind of that guy that you saw like making some strides and hitting half court shots to just a consistent, really, really good player for the Celtics. On a complete like team, you want to have somebody that's coming off your bench and can give you really positive minutes. And Peyton Pritchard's been proving all season long that he can do that. And even into last season, he's obviously like very efficient and one of the like better like bench players on that team, but has just made strides in the right direction this season. And even as a Heat fan, I can't deny it. Like Peyton Pritchard is probably your sixth man of the year.
Yeah, I agree. This is what the second award now that we agree on fully. That and the MVP. With Jaylen Brown and Drew Holiday missing some time, I just think he's just been too undeniable. But Malik Beasley deserves a shout out. Plenty of shout outs in this first segment here today because a lot of players had really good seasons and they don't end up winning the awards. So hopefully they don't get lost in the history of everything. Malik Beasley just shooting amazing as well. And I guess that would be another Piston that kind of like ends up losing out a little bit on any of the awards. But yeah, Peyton Pritchard, just too undeniable of a season for him not to win sixth man of the year. And I think some of these two have been predictions and also just who we feel should win it. This is one I think that matches up perfectly. I think he will win it.
Yep.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the most impactful college football story. I mean, I don't know if you agree with this. I think it's potentially of all time just because of the way that it's could potentially impact and change this sport over the next year or so. Nico Iamaleava is now entering the transfer portal from Tennessee after conflicting reports coming out from his camp that he wasn't negotiating, and then Tennessee heard that he was from Dan Lanning in Oregon. He was shopping the market, seeing what could be out there. He missed a practice on Friday, potentially starting another holdout. Tennessee stood their ground. They were like, nah, you can go into the transfer portal. We're not re-upping your contract. They had this issue in the playoffs too, whenever he potentially held them at gunpoint almost too, like to try to get some more money. What are your initial thoughts on this whole thing?
Yeah, I think this is just the new reality of college sports, which is really unfortunate. I don't think that maybe this situation in general is, but like with college, like players being paid, there's going to be possibly contract disputes, which is super unfortunate. I think that the Tennessee Volunteers made a great decision in not deciding to re-up his contract or whatever he was asking for, whatever the official designation of what he was asking for is. I think it's a great precedent for college sports in general that like Mario Cristobal touched on it. I know you like cover the Canes pretty closely, but he touched on it saying that if you want to do something like that, we don't need you. Like, and I think that is just like a message that's being heard all around the college football landscape. They're like getting the free college education and then also getting paid a ton of money, which I don't think that the free college for the millions, if not billions of dollars that college football brings in, the free education probably isn't enough. And I think that these players do deserve to get paid. But like when you start pushing the buttons of like certain, like you at a certain point you are replaceable, and culture is a huge part of college football, and just having a culture where like maybe other guys are wondering, can I do this too? Am I worthy enough of a contract re-up? What is my situation looking like? I think just shutting that down from the second it starts is something good. And he also, like, Tennessee's head coach was handled it very graciously. Like he like credited Nico and was saying like all of these great things about him and how he was a great player for the team. But like you just can't have that happening. It ruins the locker room. It ruins the culture of a program. And I think that sticking their ground might not have been the greatest thing for their season, their outlook, their win total probably tumbles a little bit down. But I think that in general for that program, it was probably the best thing that they could have done. And just for the wider landscape of college football, I think that setting the precedent that players aren't going to be able to bully the coaches into or bullying whoever into giving them more money. That's not going to be a thing that's going to be happening around college football. I think that was great. And I think that sentiment was kind of heard just around the college football landscape in general.
Yeah, and I think when you get support from like potentially another coach like Dan Lanning at Oregon, who didn't just like try to hop on it and just be like, yes, yeah, we'll take you, instead he actually informed Heupel and his camp and everything like that. I think it's clear that around college football, it just seems like you just could not bend the knee here. This was just not the time to give it away. But yeah, just want to initially start here with my thoughts going off of what you first said, and that was, yes, these college players are worth more than this free education, worth more than just like almost a couple like bucks here and there, like gas money. Like there are some players that are worth so much money and bring so much into the sport that like, you know what, I think everybody's in support. These players, get your money how you have to, but there are some things that probably need to be regulated. And it's not the amount that they can earn, it's just how you can get there. So then stuff like this doesn't happen. Holdouts, or potentially like Tennessee also terminating your deal, like, and cutting you or something like that. You don't want that to happen either. So I did kind of look into some of the different things that are coming up for college football that they potentially need to change. I'm going to say this. A lot of people have suggested long-term contracts. Nico was under a long-term contract. He'd been getting paid by Tennessee since the senior year of high school, essentially through the NIL collective. But I know a lot of people are looking at that. I don't know how much I want to see contracts, but if there is something more binding where you really can't get out of it, maybe that's a solution. What do you think about that? I got 3 more solutions too after this.
Yeah, I think that maybe binding contracts could be a way to go. I would have to see the logistics of it, but I think that just in general, that would probably hold players to schools longer, which is better for the college football landscape, not having everybody transfer every 2 seconds. So I think in general that sounds like a good idea. I just don't know how to be executed in practice because, like you mentioned, Nico like has been getting paid by Tennessee for forever. And it's not like it's not like they were making bad money either. Like he wanted to re-up on his contract to something that was going to be like some around $4 million, but he was still making good money from Tennessee for those years that he was getting paid too. So I think that just in general, I mean, we'd have to see how that plays out, but it could definitely be a solution.
Yeah, he was on the final year of a 4-year deal with Tennessee. Doesn't that sound like so ridiculous to even say that out loud? Okay, the spring portal. A lot of people have been saying kind of get rid of that. Obviously, it's used by a lot of spring players to go transfer if they lose out on a starting job, or they fall down the depth chart, don't like where they are, or they just actually wanted to stay with their team, play it out. A lot of people are saying maybe you only go with the winter transfer portal window. You get that one time, that one shot, because a lot of players have a ton of leverage. What do you think about that? I'm not a huge fan of that one.
Yeah, I don't know about that one. I could see like maybe like a reduction in the amount of days that like it's open for like the transfer portal window, like whenever that like stretches between it opening and closing, that may be getting reduced, or some like implementation of regulation of how like I think a transfer regulation might be more like in line with something like along those lines, like having like a certain amount of times you can transfer, like what it used to like not I don't want it to go back to what it used to be where players had to sit out a year, but just like some sort of regulation that would make it like a little bit harder for like I don't think like closing the transfer portal window completely though is the way to go, because then people are like you mentioned at the top of what you were saying, people are stuck in just like really bad situations where they go somewhere and think that they are going to be the QB1 and end up being like the third guy on the depth chart. Which I mean, people can say whatever they want about losing your starting job, but like if you're going to lose in the spring, you should be able to like maybe get a chance somewhere else in the fall.
Yeah, so that was actually going to partially put me into the space where I was going to suggest a couple ideas that were just like separate from this specific issue. And one of them was just going to be the fact that a lot of teams, I think, are pushing for that. Hey, we're losing so many players, or at least fans are pushing for this, or that so many players are playing at 4 schools in 4 years. Maybe after your second school, you have to sit out a year or something like that. I know a lot of people have suggested that. I'm honestly kind of more so okay with that than some of the other rules. But yeah, so the last two are, I think, in my opinion, kind of together because, well, this third one is together for all of it. Federal legislation. Right now, the NCAA really has no power to actually govern. I think the NCAA gets a lot of crap. They actually can't really do anything anymore about any of this stuff since some of the rulings came out that these players can earn, and the NCAA can't stop it. That is the first thing that probably needs to fall with all of this. And then The fourth solution would be employment and a collective bargaining agreement, like a true one, like almost a union of sorts between the players and these schools and these programs in the NCAA.
Yeah, I just feel like that's so hard to work out for the NCAA as a whole, just because of the fact that there's would that be college football separate from everything else, or just like would it
Yeah,
be all
that's
like college sports together? It just doesn't seem like something that could possibly happen with how many athletes that compete in collegiate sports. Like we're talking about like like thousands of like it works in a league that's maybe 1,000 players big at the max, like the NFL, or like hundreds of players big in like the NBA. But I like talking about hundreds of schools throughout the nation. I think it'd just be so hard to have something like that be like regulated into a CBA.
Admittedly, this stuff is just a little bit over our heads, like we don't know the ins and outs of it all, but I would honestly say that this is probably closer to where we're headed than the other way around. I think once the NCAA has some sort of extra grant and power just to be able to make sure to control things, because Nico could have potentially hurt himself here. Like UCLA and USC are reportedly gonna get into a bidding war to bring back the hometown kid, but like he wants to go to the NFL, right? Make as much money in college, go to the NFL. Clearly, as far as like college glory, it's a little bit like it's not really there, right? For him personally. Like this could potentially hurt his draft stock. Like some teams might look at this like he'll have to answer some questions like this in the future. I think the NCAA, it hasn't always been there to like look out for kids, right? It's been there to kind of make the buck and shove out the student athlete, but maybe hopefully there's some sort of uh better and just more logical agreement that still allows, if Nico was worth $2.2 million in one season, that he could go make that money. You know what I mean? But just in a different way that helps protect everybody from making bad decisions or whatnot. Did you have any final words on this entire situation?
Yeah, I just think that the landscape of college football is going to, or college sports, I guess you can say, is going to change so drastically over the next coming couple of years, and I think it's going to be interesting to watch. I don't have any particular like exact concrete solution to it, but I think it's going to be interesting to watch it play out because there definitely has to be regulations. I don't see this going for another decade, if not like closer to like 5 or 4 or 3 years, where they can just have 4 transfers in 4 years, or like guys holding out, or situations like this. The fact that these are popping up in like the infancy of NIL and everything that's going on with the transfer portal, I think like leans to a higher level of regulation coming relatively soon.
Also, I feel like this is I know that was supposed to be your last point on this, but like I feel like this is different than like whenever a school doesn't like give you the NIL money. Like I remember there was an issue, right? Was it with
UNLV.
UNLV? Yeah, the running back and the quarterback both were like, "Hey, look, we haven't even got paid. We're 3-0. Like, man, we're rolling. Like, where the heck is money? Like, pay us." Like that also should be recognized, as these schools just like need to also uphold the end of the bargain. So Nico's getting a lot of hate right now, but you know, it works both sides. It's the same thing with a lot of coaches. I've seen that on socials as well, where people are talking about coaches and Heupel going bouncing around too. So at a certain point, it's just the reality of the sport right now. No loyalty. All right, well, let's move to the NBA play-in. Back with basketball, there are going to be 4 play-in games as usual. 7 and 8 seeds play. The winner of that is the 7th seed, and then the loser plays the winner of the 9th and the 10th seed game. Then the winner of that game becomes the 8th seed. You get how it goes. Okay, NBA play-in preview. Let's start with the Magic versus the Hawks. Who do you got?
Yeah, I think the Magic have just been the better team all season long. If they weren't hampered by injuries, they might not even be in this position. So the Magic, I don't see them really having too big of an issue with the Hawks, especially because this is a home game for the Magic. I think that probably leads to a little bit more impact. Obviously, the Hawks rested a lot of their stars going into the last couple of games of their season, but that can be said for almost every team in the NBA at this point. Like nobody really takes the end of March / the start of April as seriously as they should, except if you're like in the Western Conference this year and fighting for your playoff lives, essentially. So I think that this is a like one of the easier ones on the slate. There's like a lot of, I feel like with the 9 and 10 seeds, that's maybe like a lot more tanking going involved in like their games, but the 7 and 18 matchup, I think that the Magic come out of this pretty handily.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, I follow the Magic throughout the entire year, and I might be a little bit biased, but yeah, these teams played before the finale of the regular season, both fully ready to go, and the Magic were able to take that game. So I'm taking that win and I'm applying it to this play-in game. Also, yeah, you're right. Like the Magic maybe potentially aren't in this position if Jalen Suggs can stay healthy, if all of their guys can stay healthy throughout the year. The Pistons did take that though. You know, they had a great season, so I give the Pistons credit. But yeah, this Magic team is probably a little bit better than the 7th seed. Also, they're 5-29 when they hit under 10 threes this season. But one of those wins is against the Hawks. So that's also something that's nice for them. All right, let's move out west. Grizzlies, Warriors. Obviously, Warriors fell to the Clippers yesterday. What do you got, or who do you got for that game?
There's just too much going on with the Grizzlies right now. I think the Warriors are flat out the better team. Obviously, that race for anywhere from 4 to 8 was completely insane this year. But I think that the Warriors are just the overall better team. They're last time I checked, they had 20 wins to like maybe 5 losses or something crazy number like that with Jimmy Butler on the floor. Jimmy Butler's been a great addition for them this season. They obviously are not too far removed from winning the NBA championship. The very similar roster minus Jimmy Butler. So I think that this team is better than a struggling Memphis Grizzlies team and can really like honestly take it to them. I think that this is probably one of the better lower seeds in the Western Conference right now. So I have the Warriors winning. Maybe a little bit of Jimmy Butler bias in my Miami Heat days, but I know who playoff Jimmy is, and I think that he can win a game versus the Grizzlies, especially with like Steph Curry and all the other players they have on that team.
Yeah, I know it might not be a shock to say that the best playing team is the 7th seed in the Western Conference, but yeah, this Warriors team has just so much experience. I would be thoroughly shocked if they lost this game against the Grizzlies. I think they have real playoff aspirations, so I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, I don't know how far they're going to get anymore. Obviously, that Clippers game really kind of sucks for them because they have to work their way up, but they'll be matched up potentially against the Houston Rockets. I think that's a fun series. And maybe I'm getting a little bit too far ahead of myself. I think they'll beat the Grizzlies, though. And also no Jalen Wells for the Grizzlies, too, right, with his hand or wrist injury. So that'll help them a lot. And I think Steph Curry will have another really good game. All right, let's move to the Heat versus the Bulls.
Yeah, so naturally, I think I know who the better team is in this matchup, but for my sake as a fan, I'm hoping that the Heat lose this game and get better draft lottery odds. The Heat, from top to bottom, if you look at this team, they're probably better than the 9 seed or even a play-in spot. Maybe obviously there's a lot of teams in the East where you can kind of say that for, and the bottom of that, like non-playoff play-in seeds are the Detroit Pistons, who had a really good season. But from top to bottom, you have Tyler Hero, you have Bam Adebayo, who like regressed a little bit this season. But that being said about Bam, Tyler Hero took another step up this season. It was a lot of really like good to great players on that team. I don't know how many great players you can say are on that team, but Davion Mitchell has been a really good player since he's gotten here. Andrew Wiggins has obviously been like he's done his thing. He hasn't been great. He's been above average this season. So I think that team, if you just look at them versus a 9 seed, they're probably the better team. But I'm just hoping that they lose, and I'm hoping that the Hawks are able to pull one. They're able to pull one out.
Yeah, I mean, look, so I think the Heat are probably going to win this game as well. When we get into the 9-10 conversations, especially in the Eastern Conference, like I don't know exactly what these teams would want or prefer. And obviously you as a Heat fan would prefer this Miami Heat team to just continue to just try to get that lottery pick built for the future and stuff like that. But I think they have just too much talent, too much experience. So I'm going to go with the Heat as well. But I trust your judgment on anything that you might think that's going to happen. And also, I believe, did you say the Bulls were favored?
Yeah, the Bulls are favored with the Heat are gonna have to go on the road for this. So I think that maybe plays a little bit into it. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really care about the way this team like plays right now either, just because this team isn't like even close to a championship contending team. So there's no point in like making the playoffs and getting swept by the Cavs or yeah.
Yeah. All right, Kings versus Mavericks. Probably the same, like a similar conversation here too.
Yeah, I think it's almost remotely the same exact, like literally the same exact conversation. Yeah, I don't care enough about this game to like even possibly tune in on a game that's going to be a standalone game. I think that the Kings are able to pull it out. I think the Kings are the better team. Anthony Davis could like go off and have a crazy game and force the Mavericks into a possible matchup versus the Grizzlies, who we think are losing the 7-8 series. But I think the Mavericks are a little bit worse than the Kings just from top to bottom, and I think the Kings win the game. But again, this is possibly one of the games, out of, if I had to choose any game that I'm not going to watch out of the 4, it's probably going to be this one.
Yeah, I would say the only way that the Mavericks win this is if Anthony Davis goes off, and I'm personally not betting on that, nor am I ever going to bet on the Dallas Mavericks, probably ever in my NBA basketball watching career. I just think that this season is too far gone from them. I don't know what the Kings' direction is right now, but they're not going to lose this game against the Dallas Mavericks, in my opinion. I don't think so at all. Any final words on any other topics that we covered today?
Nah, I had fun. Good episode. So that was all I had.
Yeah, I think so too. All right. Well, this has been the Big Little Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Previty. That is Andrew Greig, and we'll see you guys next time.